My name is Rich Milner, and I have the honor of being your president at least for 48 more hours. So I'm excited also to say that your president-elect is in the room. My mentor, Tyrone Howard, is back in the room. Yeah. It feels like a family reunion. It feels like a family reunion, and that's what we do when we get together. It's just great to see people hug each other and greet each other. It's just such a special and a warm environment, and so I thank you for creating that kind of space. I met Dr. Tillman in 2001 when I was a doctoral student at the Ohio State University. That's right, I said it. The Ohio State University, and she has been such a dear friend and such a dear mentor to me ever since. I just want to take a moment. If Dr. Tillman has mentored you in some way, just stand on your feet for a moment. Just stand on your moment. Just stand on your feet. I just want you to look around and see the great impact you have made on the lives of so many. When Mark Gooden and I don't know if Mark is here. Mark is here. Linda has just been a true champion for us, for so many of us who were attempting to navigate this place. Who would have thought that in 2001 I would be that you would think enough of me to elect me as president? And I stand here for so many reasons. As I stand here because of so much of the advice and so much of the insight and mentoring of Dr. Tillman. I want to also say that I had the distinct pleasure. You don't get a lot of I see some presidents in the audience. I see Joyce King and others here. You don't get. Let's give it up for Joyce King. Yeah. You don't get a lot of privileges as president. You know, everything is done through council. But one of the few things that we do get to do is to name our Wallace and our distinguished lecturers. And so I wanted. It was very clear to me when Felice shared with me that I could name the Wallace lecturer. I called Linda immediately. As soon as I got the note, I called Linda. And so it's such an honor to be able to. It was an honor to be able to make the phone call, but thank you for agreeing. Dr. Linda C. Tillman is Professor Emerita of Education Leadership of the School of Education at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and is currently Distinguished Visiting Professor at Iona Marymount University in Los Angeles, California. She has held faculty positions at the University of New Orleans, Wayne State University in Detroit, Michigan, and has been an adjunct professor at Teachers College, Columbia University in the Urban Education Leadership Program. Dr. Tillman is a former public school educator with high school teaching and administrative experiences. Her groundbreaking research and scholarship is focused on school leadership, the education of African Americans in K-12 education, mentoring in higher education, and culturally sensitive research approaches. Her work has appeared in all of the great places that we think of in our work we do. But come to the talk later tomorrow, because I'm gonna disrupt that a little bit. But her work has appeared in Education Administration Quarterly, Education Researcher, the Review of Research in Education, Review of Education Research, and Teachers College Record. She is editor-in-chief of the Sage Handbook of African Americans in Education and co-editor with none other than Jim Sherrick, who is in the house as well. Of the Handbook of Research on Educational Leadership for Diversity in Education. Dr. Tillman's culturally sensitive research framework has been widely cited and is used across disciplines, including educational leadership, teacher education, and education psychology, as well as medical/healthcare research, including research on diabetes in African Americans by researchers at the University of California at San Francisco, and research on pregnancy and childbearing among young African American women by researchers at the University of Minnesota. Dr. Tillman is the former vice president of Division A of the American Education Research Association, and she is the recipient of the UCEA J.D. Scribner Mentoring Award. She is also the inaugural recipient and I want you all to hear this, of the she has an award named in her honor called the Linda C. Tillman Social and Racial Justice Award from the University Council of Education Administration. And I can't think of anybody more deserving of Dr. Tillman. I could go on and on and on and on and on, but it ain't about me. I see Sonia out there. It is not about me. I want to ask you, please stand and welcome to the podium Dr. Linda C. Tillman.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. It's my honor to present the Wallace Foundation Distinguished Lecture today. I would like to thank AERA President H. Richard Milner IV for the invitation. It's awesome when your mentee invites you to be a distinguished lecturer at the annual meeting. I would also like to thank the Wallace Foundation for their support of this lecture and a few other people. My students and colleagues at Loyola Marymount University, where I've been a distinguished visiting professor for the last 2 years, my friends and colleagues at the Black Education Research Center, they're in the house today at Columbia University. And thank you to all the people that tried to help me get this speech together, Professors A.J. Welton, Terry Watson, DeLeon Gray, Dana Griffin, and my graduate assistant, Jeremy Divinity. And last but not least, I give honor to the sacrifices of my ancestors, my grandmother, Carrie Nivens Tillman, my grandfather, William H. Tillman Sr., and my great-grandmother, Emily Clark Nivens. The leadership they deserve, effective Black principal leadership for Black students in public schools. The Wallace Foundation describes school leadership as second only to teaching among school-related factors in its impact on student learning. Moreover, principals strongly shape the conditions for high-quality teaching and are the prime factor in determining whether teachers stay in high-need schools. High-quality principals, therefore, are vital to the effectiveness of our nation's public schools, especially those serving children with the fewest advantages in life. Many of us in this room have worked in K-12 schools, and some of us have been principals. We know, as the Wallace Foundation indicates, that students and teachers need and deserve effective principal leadership. While a great deal has been written about principal leadership and what makes it effective, it is still the case that much of the research on principal leadership is primarily situated in generic theories and practices which often disregard the influences of school contexts and the student populations that principals serve. Today, I would like to call your attention to the leadership of Black principals whose leadership practices very often are influenced by the context, cultures, and communities surrounding the schools that they lead, and whose stories are rarely told in the school leadership literature, and their theories are rarely considered in leadership preparation programs. The historical legacy of Black principals. The historical legacy of Black principals can be found in the work of distinguished scholar historians such as James Anderson, Vanessa Siddle Walker, and V.P. Franklin. We know from their scholarship that the work of pre-Brown principals was historically and culturally significant. Black principals worked in all Black schools, schools that were considered the cultural symbol of the community. We also know that Black principal leaders espoused a tradition of excellence and an agenda for the education of Black students that dates back to the 1860s. Black principals served as models of servant leaders who believed in an ethos of service, which obligated those who acquired knowledge to transfer that knowledge to others in the Black community. A prominent theme in the stories of Black Americans during the pre-Brown era of education was their persistent struggle to be included in an educational system that they believed would guarantee their freedom and their participation in a democratic society. Black principals understood the importance of developing an educated Black community, and they held themselves accountable for the academic achievement of Black children who attended all Black public and private schools. Black principals in the pre-Brown era of education also knew that their own progress was directly linked to the social, academic, and economic progress of Blacks as a race. As Siddle Walker notes, the perspective of the Black principal is central to explaining how the segregated Black schools were able to fight the demon of racism by helping Black children believe in what they were capable of achieving. Black principals helped Black children believe in what they were capable of doing. They gave Black students the leadership they deserved. Indeed, their philosophies and practices during the pre-Brown era of education represent theories and models of school leadership for the post-Brown education of Black children. Fast forward to today. What do we know about Black principals and school leadership? Well, Black principals only represent 11% of all principals in public schools. Thus, there's an imbalance between the number of Black principals, which is 11%, and the number of Black students, which is 15%. Related to that, a 2021 survey by the National Association of Secondary School Principals indicates that 4 out of 10 principals are expected to leave the profession due to the pandemic, political tensions, and other issues. This expected exodus from the profession is certain to exacerbate the shortage of Black principals who are available to help educate Black children. Additionally, Black principals usually lead schools in where majority Black populations. Black principals usually work in where schools that are high poverty, and most of the students qualify for free and reduced lunch. And most Black principals are females and work in elementary schools. Some research on the Black principalship. Well, much of the research around principals and Black principals in particular tends to be subsumed under the headings of either leaders of color or just leaders. So we have very little separate information about Black principals. However, there are a few recent studies that focus more directly on Black principals and provide evidence of the positive impact that Black principals can have on the education of Black students. I'm going to discuss just 3 of those. You see them on the screen. A research partnership between the California Charter Schools Association, researchers from Loyola Marymount University, resulted in a report titled Charting the Course for Equity, K-12 Leaders of Color and Student Success. In this report, the researchers analyzed the relationship between having a leader of color, Black or Latinx, and his school-level outcomes in California's public schools during the 2017-18 academic year. 2 important findings from this research are, on average, Black students with a Black principal scored significantly higher than their counterparts on state tests, especially in high schools. Black students scored 19.1 percentage points higher in mathematics and 16.8 points higher in English language arts. And secondly, in California high schools, black principals were associated with a 4.2 decrease in the number of Black students who were suspended from school. So the researchers conclude that there is evidence that there is a correlation between the practices of Black principals and the achievement levels of Black students. In a second study done for the Wallace Foundation, Grissom, Elite, and Lindsay, in their study of 2 decades of research on how principals affect students and schools, found that increasing the racial and ethnic diversity of the principalship is important because Black principals appear to be especially important actors in the school. And the presence of a Black principal appears to produce positive outcomes for students, such as higher school achievement, and teachers, such as fewer teachers leaving the profession or leaving the building. Additionally, they point out that connections between Black principals, Black teachers, and Black students becomes more important as a rapidly diversifying student population means a growing mismatch in the race and ethnicity of principals and students. And in the third study by Yang and Alexander, they studied the leadership practices and behaviors of Black women high school principals, which is very understudied. Very seldom do we study high school principals that are Black women. They, they found that teachers in schools with Black women principals tended to perceive greater collective responsibility than teachers who worked in schools where there was not a Black principal. And Black women principals were associated with math achievement scores that were higher for all ninth graders, including white students. And this refutes some research that says that principals only have an indirect effect on students. So we see the direct effects of that because the ninth grade math scores increase. Another aspect of the Black principalship is their preparation. How are they prepared? The preparation of principals is important. How aspiring principals are trained often correlates to how they're going to lead. What they learn in our leadership preparation programs has a lot to do with what they end up doing in a school. Most principal preparation programs are located in universities, schools of education, and in some cases, these universities will also pair with and form partnership with local and national organizations to train future principals of color to increase the pipeline. One such program is the Aspiring Principals of Color Fellowship, which trains cohorts of aspiring leaders in Los Angeles and San Francisco. So this is a picture of the 2020-2021 cohort. The Fellows Program is a collaboration between the Diversity in Leadership Institute, led by founder and CEO Dr. Laura McGowan Robertson, and Loyola Marymount University Institute of School Leadership and Administration, led by Dr. Manuel Pomps. The Leadership Preparation Program has an intentional, very intentional, super intentional focus on preparing leaders of color, and thus is a program for leaders of color by leaders of color. All of the professors who teach in the program are leaders of color, principals, superintendents, other central office administrators. The goal of this program is to prepare and graduate 100 aspiring principals of color within 3 years of launching the first cohort. The Aspiring Principals of Color Fellowship also intentionally removes barriers that prevent many Black educators from becoming principals. One is the tuition is free. The tuition is free. Secondly, yes. Secondly, fellows are assigned mentors from the beginning of the program and for 10 months after the completion. And all of the graduates of the program join a network of principals of color as a support group. One of the things that the brochure says that I find interesting, so that they're putting this out there, that leadership experiences are provided for aspiring and rising Black and Latino school leaders in California who want to expand and deepen their impact within their school community, especially as it relates to culturally responsive school leadership, racial diversity, equity, and inclusion. Participants are culturally responsive school leader use culturally responsive school leadership models to explore how their own cultural identity affects their leadership and how system and structural racism and white supremacy may have impacted how they serve their students and their families. The Aspiring Leaders of Color Fellows, as well as other similar programs, are important to increasing the numbers of Black educators who are recruited and hired for principalship programs. So even while most of the research about Black principals tends to be sort of, I'll say, lumped into the category of leaders of color, there are several findings that are important for us to consider. Black principals increase the recruitment, hiring, and retention of Black teachers. Black principals set high expectations for and improve student performance of Black students. Black principals increase the enrollment of Black students in gifted programs. They reduce the disciplinary disparity and develop an equity-focused culture in their schools. So, if we are going to have effective Black principals for Black students, how then do we go about that? I'm glad you asked me that. There are some important leadership philosophies and practices that Black principals must adopt to give Black students the leadership they deserve. In my article, African American Principles and the Legacy of Brown, I articulate 4 dimensions of Black principal leadership that are intended to provide leadership for Black students that will enhance their social, emotional, and academic success. First, resistance to ideologies and individuals opposed to the education of Black students. We see that every day, all day long these days. Black principals must have an individual and collective will to educate every Black child. They must be agents of change for Black students and resist these theories, ideologies, stereotypes, policies, and false claims about the inferiority of Black students. Many of us in this room were told that we were not college ready. A teacher, a counselor, and perhaps a principal told us we would not get into college. We wouldn't be accepted into a master's program, and we certainly would not be Dr. somebody sitting in this room. Black children should not be subjected to those kinds of negative messages. Black principals must counter the myths of inferiority by instilling racial pride, self-esteem, and self-respect in Black students by their presence, because they're in the building and in their practice. Black principals must let Black students know that school is the place for them to dream big dreams, to excel academically, and to begin to chart their course for success. While society may devalue them as human beings, Black principals must give Black students the confidence to work to overcome negative stereotypes and other roadblocks to education that will enhance their life chances. Black principal leadership must also include working with parents, communities, to dispel any notion of inferiority. We can't have parents believing their children are inferior. We have to help them know that that is not the case and they can succeed. And they must emphasize their commitment. If you aren't going to be committed, don't do this, please, to educating all Black children, regardless of the circumstances. Black principals must give Black students the leadership they deserve. The academic and social development of Black students as a priority. Black principals must place the education of Black students as a priority in their practice. If you're in a school and most of the students are Black, or 5 of them are Black, the chances that they will do well a lot of times are much less than the other students. So you have to place their education as a priority. I mean, you got to be about that life. Many times their underperformance is considered a given, something that is expected of Black students. They're going to fail. They can't succeed. A given. Black principals must set high expectations for Black students and then develop and implement policies, practices, procedures that facilitate academic and social development. Their commitment to the academic and social development of Black students must include using every opportunity to hire qualified, I said qualified, teachers, provide internal and external resources, implement quality, I said quality after school programs, provide access to advanced placement classes, and provide opportunities to learn about post-secondary after school, assume they're going to graduate, and career paths. So a lot of them, I'm amazed that students are still being told by school counselors, you should probably go work in a factory or you're not going to. I mean, these children are still getting those messages. Black principals must make schools transformational spaces. In the pre-Brown era of education, schools were transformational spaces. They didn't use the word transformation, but they were transformational spaces. Spaces that provide Black students with nurturing, encouragement, and support they need to face obstacles inside and outside of school. Many large urban school districts with primarily Black student populations do not provide an environment where Black principals can assume what Kofi Lomote calls an ethno-humanist role identity, an identity where the principal's primary identity is concerned with educating children. Black principals must let Black students know that school is the place where they can make a way out of no way. If you're Black, you know that. Black principals must give Black students the leadership they deserve. Third, the importance of cultural perspectives of the Black principal. We can't leave our Blackness at the door, y'all. It's just like, we can't. In the pre-Brown era of education, many Black educators and principals and teachers lived in the same neighborhood as their students. Principals were connected to the Black community through the same race and cultural affiliations, such as churches or social organizations. Principals not only served as leaders, they also served as protectors, advocates, and other mothers and other fathers to Black children in segregated schools. Black principals understood the cultural ways of knowing of their students, their families, and the communities where they lived. They understood that Black students deserved effective Black principal leadership, and they took pride in their roles as principal leaders. Today, teachers and principals may not live in the same neighborhoods with their students, but, but it is still important that students, parents, and communities see the Black principal as the central figure in their children's education. Black principals must be aware of and respect the racial and cultural norms of Black students and their families. Black principals must also include in their leadership practice personal contact with Black parents. Parents who often go to the school and receive the message that they are not welcome there and their children don't matter. That still happens, y'all. They must convey to students, parents, and communities that they are aware of their unique circumstances, circumstances that often lead to Black children being marginalized, underserved, and undereducated. They must use their same race and cultural affiliation to overcome tensions, distrust, and apathy that often exists between parents and school administrators. The cultural perspectives of Black principals can be used, this is my Division A people, y'all, they can be used to present a distinctly Black leadership practice. Similar to the segregated schools in the South in the pre-Brown era, Black principals must use their insider status to foster a school climate and culture that facilitates success for Black children. And lastly, leadership based on interpersonal caring. Black principals must exhibit an ethic of care towards their students, and especially Black students who may not have experienced care. They may not live in environments where there is care. Black children in public schools should feel confident that Black principals care about them as human beings. Not only must Black principals exhibit interpersonal caring toward Black students, they must also let students know that everybody in the school cares about them. The teachers, the assistant principals, the school counselors, the janitors, whoever needs to care about these kids. Jim Shurek says, we use the term caring, but also it's called love, that we must care about and love our Black students. Black principals who exhibit interpersonal caring make sure that students know they are committed to their social, emotional, and academic success, that they are compassionate leaders who care about their students, who are loving toward their students, and will provide any psychological and emotional support they can. Thus, leadership based on interpersonal caring includes the principal's very direct and purposeful attention to meeting the psychological, sociological, and academic needs of students. A Black principal who is a caring leader engages in leadership practices that refute myths that characterize Black educators as uncaring, unwilling, and unable to address the needs of Black students, particularly those who are from low socioeconomic backgrounds, neighborhoods that are often plagued by violence, and who may have very little contact with adults as role models. Interpersonal caring is an absolutely necessary dimension of excellence in the Black principalship. Black students need to experience love and care. They need to experience leadership that they deserve. In calling your attention to some of the disparities that Black principals must address, I'm not suggesting that all Black children in all public schools are underperforming academically, live in poverty, or have never experienced effective principal leadership. We know that there are plenty of Black students who excel academically in public schools, are not in the school to prison pipeline, who attend and graduate from college and become productive members of society because we're sitting in this room. These Black students not only survive in these public schools, but they thrive in those schools. However, there are still too many Black students who fall into the following categories. 1/3 of all Black students in public schools live in poverty. A high percentage of Black students attend high poverty schools. The achievement gap between Black and white students has not been erased. The dropout rates for Black students are higher than for whites. So Black students who do fall into these categories need effective Black principalship. So it's easy for me as a public school educator and now a professor to talk about giving Black students the leadership they deserve. Like many of us in this room, I can do that without ever even asking the student anything, without even asking the student, what do you think is the leadership that you deserve? So I ask a few students, what kind of leadership do you deserve? Meet Jeremiah. Jeremiah is 16 years old and in the 10th grade. He is a member of the speech and debate team and participates in 2 sports, cross country and track, at his school. Jeremiah says he deserves a principal who has strong integrity, good character, and is confident in how he or she presents him or herself. He says he deserves a principal who is a role model for him and other students, especially Black males, especially Black males. More importantly, he says he deserves a principal who is caring, engages with students, and prioritizes the well-being and safety of all students in the school. Meet Jules. Jules is 15, and she is interested in creating cultural and community experiences. Most recently, she created a mini documentary entitled, "Who Taught You to Hate the Texture of Your Hair?" The documentary was featured during the Durham, North Carolina Public Schools 2023 Crown Act Week. Jules is also a Black and Belonging Research Fellows, a research project headed by Dr. DeLeon Gray at NC State University. Jules says she deserves a principal who is attentive, listens to students, and tries to understand students when they come to him or her with a problem. She also says a principal should engage with students and take action on issues and concerns that directly affect Black students. Lastly, Jules says she deserves a principal who loves their students and makes sure that the school is a safe place for all of them. Meet Mikhail. Mikhail is 18 years old and is in the 12th grade. He is also a Black and Belonging Fellow with Dr. DeLeon Gray. He is interested in some strange things: beekeeping, clinical psychology, and food sovereignty. Mikhail was awarded 2 full rides to Duke University, and he will begin his studies at Duke in the fall 2023 semester. Mikhail says he deserves a principal who practices leadership that is based in the reality of Black students. He explains that the reality is that Black students are unlike other students of other races, and principals must be aware of the racial and cultural differences between their students. He adds that he deserves a principal who helps students to think into the future, create and build their own projects or businesses, and who want to become future leaders. He also stated that the principal must help students to look at problems that Black people experience and help them to navigate anti-racist systems. Mikhail attended AERA last year I was one of his faculty mentors, and this is a picture of him presenting the Black and Belonging research. Um, Now, Jules and McKells attend Hillside High School in Durham, North Carolina, and they said they have the principal they deserve. Dr. William T. Logan, who is Principal of the Year at Hillside High School in Durham, North Carolina. Dr. Logan was also Principal of the Year in 2014. He's been the principal for 10 years. He is known as a transformational leader. Um, Under his leadership, Hillside was named a 2020 Magnet School of Distinction. He has improved the academic performance of his students, has been able to get $100 million in scholarship money to his students, recognized by the U.S. Department of Education as a model transformational school, and increased enrollment in advanced placement classes. Dr. Logan is giving Black students the leadership they deserve. So as I've noted, it's pretty good. As I've noted, there's also a great deal of research on the topic of leadership, but much more leadership is needed about the specific leadership practices of Black principals, those who work in the trenches, the large urban districts, often with many low-income Black students who are underserved and underrepresented. I believe that their leadership is strongly influenced by the context in which they lead and the backgrounds and experiences of the students they serve. Thus, there are some central research questions that need continued exploration. The answers to these questions can contribute to leadership theory and practice. First, what specific factors affect the leadership practices of Black principals, particularly those in urban schools? What specific leadership styles are exhibited by Black principals? Then what specific strategies do Black principals use to facilitate the academic achievement of Black students? And then how can leadership preparation programs be more intentional in preparing leaders to give Black students the leadership they deserve? How can leadership preparation programs include an intentional focus on Black school leadership that focuses on the kinds of school contexts where most Black principals lead? And how do leadership preparation programs who claim, who profess to have a social justice focus address social injustices that impact Black students? So the title of my talk was The Leadership They Deserve, Effective Black Principal Leadership in Public Schools. And I just want to add a few words to that and change that title to The Leadership They Deserve, Effective Black Principal Leadership for Black Students in Public Schools for such a time as this. Black students deserve effective Black principal leadership for such a time as this, because despite the historical legacy of the Black principalship, despite the work of organizations like the Wallace Foundation, and despite the work of award-winning principals like Dr. Logan, Black children continue to experience anti-Black racism, long-lasting effects of COVID, mental health challenges, learning loss, high rates of discipline, disparities in special ed, higher grade retention, limited access to advanced placement, and the failed promises of Brown. So, to give Black students the leadership they deserve for such a time as this one, right here, with all we're going through, we must remember the words of Fannie Jackson Coppin, who said, "It was in me to get an education and to teach my people." I'll paraphrase that and say, and then we must ask ourselves, is it in us to get an education and give Black students the leadership they deserve? For such a time as this, Black principals will have to do what Dr. T. Elon Dancy, the sexton, calls freedom work. Work that intentionally centers the lives of Black students and frees them from the disparities that often smother and suffocate their hopes and their dreams. Black principals will have to work for all Black children. Black principals must be freedom workers. For such a time as this, Black principals will have to practice what AERA President Dr. H. Richard Milner IV, in his new book, The Race Card, Leading the Fight for Truth in America's Schools, calls frontline leadership. Leadership that names, disrupts, addresses, and counters the interconnected reality of oppression and human suffering that too many young people in schools and society face. Black principals must be frontline leaders. For such a time as this, Black principals must adopt the stance of Dr. Angela Davis, and I paraphrase, I will no longer accept the things that I cannot change in public schools. I will change the things that I cannot accept. I will give Black students the leadership they deserve. And finally, for such a time as this, Black principals must give students the leadership they deserve. They must be leaders as well as servants, leaders as well as mothers and other mothers and other fathers, and leaders as well as advocates for Black children. In closing, I would like to paraphrase a well-known quote by Dr. Ron Edmonds. We can, whenever and wherever we choose, successfully lead all Black children whose schooling is of interest to us. We already know more than we need to know to do this. Whether we give all Black students the leadership they deserve will depend on how we feel about the fact that we haven't done it so far. Thank you.
And that was excellent. That was outstanding. Don't have a seat yet. No, I'm just gonna. Thank you all for being here. Thank you so much for being here. We have time for some questions and responses from Dr. Tillman. And I'll ask that you please stand and pose your question as loudly as you possibly can. And I will repeat the question for Dr. Tillman. Affirmations, yes.
Affirmation, my dissertation research is on Black women principles, and exactly what you said is what I found in my participants. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yes.
First, thank you so much for blessing us with your wisdom. Much appreciated.
Tell us who you are as well and where you're from.
My name is now officially Dr. Courtney Wilkerson. April 6th at Howard University, and my topic was how Black principals eradicate racial bias against Black children. And I looked explicitly at Dr. Lamote and Dr. Leath's framework to identify what are those unique actions that Black principals did. And so I would like to hear from you your take on how ethnohumanism and culture responses to leadership works together for Black principals.
Well, those two brothers have it laid down, so I don't can't add much to it. But on the ethno-humanist side, it's making sure that we continue to be human towards our students, that we continue to try to understand the circumstances that might define their life. And some good, some not so good. And then on the culturally responsive models end, I think we have to have those. And many of the leader preparation programs around the country are using those because we have situated leadership as sort of a generic thing. all leaders are white, all leaders do this, all leaders do that, all kids come from these environments. So, with the culturally responsive leadership models, we can dig deeper into the circumstances of the students and the culture of the school, and then the principal can react to those appropriately if he or she has been studying these models and trying to figure out how the models are specific to their school. So I think that's important, that we have the models, but how do you use it in your school? Because one school may be a lot different from the other one.
Yes. Joyce King.
Thank you so much for this beautiful example of scholarship and leadership. And I want to pick up on the last part. For such a time as this, many states are putting into legislation exactly the kinds of policies that would mitigate against the leadership that you described. And I'd like to know what you think about a role for parents and community in supporting principals, some of whom are being driven out of the profession.
Yeah, so I think parents have to be very knowledgeable. We have to train them to be advocates, because if we keep them in the model where they're sort of like support people, where they just bring in the cookies and make the copies of the papers for us, then they are very often ignorant of what the political ramifications are of what you're talking about. So I do think that in the school community, we have to, if we can, I mean, we have to get past these sort of boards of education and people thinking that we have some ulterior motive, because as researchers, they see us coming and then they go, oh, that's just another research project. You're not going to be here when this is over with, and I'm not going to waste my time messing around with you. So I think we have to gain the trust of the community, and then to help them be able to advocate not only for their children, but if the principal is an effective principal, to advocate for the principal. Because a lot of times the principals don't have anybody to advocate for them. They're out there swimming by themselves. And so I think it's important that we go back to the pre-bound thing, just start thinking about, if I'm the parent and this school is the only school my kid can go to, and these people are the only people going to be able to teach my kids, then I'm going to have to get in there and advocate for the principal and those teachers to stay there. And I think we have some cases of it, but we don't have a lot of, it's not a model that a lot of districts follow.
Professor Tillman, thank you so much for that dynamic lecture. I love so much that you introduced us to some students. Hear their voices. Would you just expound a little bit more about how principals might activate and focus on surfacing and encouraging students to step into the sense of agency that you pointed us at?
No, I think the same thing. The principals have to find the parents who are available, who are willing, who want to be more than just the PTA members, and they want to be sure that they have an active part in molding, nurturing, encouraging these students. Um, and so, but principals have to be willing to reach out to the parents. So you have the difficult parent who comes into the school, and then there's automatic tension there. So you got two choices. You can kick them out, and then the student knows you kicked his mother or father out of there, so then they're going to start getting an attitude. Or you can call them in and tell them, I'd like for you to join my team. I'd like for you to help me mold these students to make sure they have a chance in life. In some of these districts, they're surrounded by a lot of violence, surrounded by a lot of, negative things. And so they're children. Now, they might try to act grown, but they're children. And so they need adults who are caring and loving to come together in unity, as a community and help these kids. I think.
Uh, Hello, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Tillman, for this very, very insightful perspective, actually. It's the first time I listen to someone talking about leadership, bringing the word that without mentioning the word why.
Well, that would be me.
Very, very interesting, actually. Uh, my takeaway first is based on, I will borrow Robert Segan and Lisa LeHay, writing a book on management. And I think that's what I learned today is that all leaders should be leadership, schools as organizations, as well as leaders. And they should be deliberately development. They shouldn't be just accidentally development. Every kid deserves to be developed as a leader. That's number one. Number two, those schools and misbehavior, they do not mean that a kid cannot be a leader. But sometimes the caring drops because we look at some of the dimensions that schools sometimes focus on that I think we should just reflect on. So I think that schools should just stop reflecting on thinking about just the achievement level, which is based on just scores and getting, passing exams and so on, and looking at other perspectives. Thank you so much.
Yeah, because they have to do something else. I mean, they can be as smart as they can be, but when they get out into the world, you get past high school, then what? I mean, what have we prepared them to do once they graduate from high school? Have we given them the confidence to go into these spaces where we know the spaces are not made for us? And so, how do you prepare people? Well, we got a room full of people in here who went into spaces that weren't prepared for us. Yeah.
Let's do one more.
Let's see her.
Last
Wait,
question.
back
Please
there.
stay. Yes.
Oh, that's Raquel. Hi, Raquel. The newly Dr. Raquel Armstrong.
And thinking about my dissertation study, which also looks at context, suburban context, and rural context, where Black young principals are serving. One of the things that they mentioned is this tension between leading and taking agency for Black children and the expectation that they cannot do that and serve all children in those contexts. If you could talk a little bit about your thoughts about how to be that agent of change in spaces that are more predominantly white and not predominantly Black.
Yeah, I think I mean, it's still the same thing. So if you're for all of us who went to a PWI to get our doctorates, there's a lot of hands in here. The space wasn't made for us, and so someone had to help us negotiate, navigate that space. So kids who are in school, Raquel is in a suburban school in the Columbus area, which has very few Black students, mostly white. And so, as an assistant principal, how does she then still make an agenda for Black students? She has to do some outside work outside the school. She has to work with the parents. She has to talk to the principal and get the principal to understand that all these, as Mikhail said, all these students are not alike. You do have to make some adjustments or arrangements and make sure that these kids have a space, that they have a voice, that they feel comfortable in class, that they feel they can graduate from this school. And so I think that's a collaboration of the minds with the principal, the powers that want to help these children. Because there's another suburban school that has this just sort of a Black club in it for these I think that's Bexley, that has just this white club, a Black club, and the parents and the Black teachers have come together because of racial incidents that went into the school. So sometimes there's some tipping point. There's a tipping point in there of something that has happened, and then that forces teachers and principals to, do more than they have done. Gotta say, it's an ongoing job. It's not a like temporary thing.
Yeah, join me once again in thanking Dr.
Thank you. Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your time.